Now, we have talked on this show for quite some time about a concern I have, and I know a lot of you have as well, about Common Core. These are a set of standards that the state of Utah has adopted and are now starting to implement in the schools out there. And there are so many people out there who, maybe because they're busy, don't even really think much about it. But Common Core is something I think this state really needs to reconsider. Now, I know Governor Herbert is a big fan of this. The National Governors Association, big fan, saying, hey, look, states were involved in setting up these standards. Not really. Bill and Melinda Gates had a lot to do with it. And I noticed just yesterday that the Indiana Senate has now passed a bill, a measure providing, finally, for public hearings around the state of Indiana to reconsider adoption of Common Core standards. But what is Utah doing when it comes to Common Core? Well, joining us on our newsmaker line right now is Alisa Ellis. Alisa, who has been involved in this, I think, for a long, long time. She's with a group called Utahns Against Common Core. And I wanted to check in with her and kind of get an update as to where everything stands here in the state of Utah. Alisa, how are you? And welcome back to the show. Great to have you on.
Great. Thank you for having me. I am doing fabulous. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, let me ask you, Alisa, first of all, your reaction to when you heard this story that Indiana has decided to reconsider whether or not they're going to get involved in Common Core.
Well, I just think it's fabulous. And I don't know if you're aware that there are 8 states currently with legislation pending to opt their states out of Common Core or reconsider it as Indiana has put into play. And I just think it's great as more and more states are starting to look at what actually happened, look at the process, look at the procedure, and question it. People around the country are really starting to develop a fervor and push back a little bit on this agenda.
Lisa, what is Utah doing? Is there any movement up on Capitol Hill to try and at least reconsider this?
Well, Brian Green introduced a bill that has not been drafted, but it was to opt districts out of Common Core, which is good news because charters are each an individual district. And so many people in the state of Utah are for school choice. However, with Common Core, it is a false choice because they're having to maintain these federal mandates with the No Child Left Behind waiver and what we agreed to with the race to the top, which I know we did not receive. And so this bill, I have not seen the drafting. It's not done. But it sounds like an excellent option to at least give some sort of sense of freedom back to some aspects of our education system in Utah.
Well, Lisa, why should parents be concerned about this or at least take time to study it and understand what Common Core is all about?
Well, it affects the future of our nation. It's quite interesting. If you look at the president's agenda for education, Common Core state standards are only one small piece in a much larger education reform agenda. Recently, he commissioned a Equity and Excellence Commission, and they just issued a report saying that the Common Core state standards would be a means to evolve into content standards that would empower the federal government to negate America's local school funding system and force the redistribution of local tax money across municipal lines. And so this is much more than just education standards. There's an entire social justice aspect to the Common Core state standards entire initiative.
Why are people raising more concerns, do you think, Alisa?
Well, last night I saw a YouTube video put out in the state of Alabama by the education establishment. And basically they told the teachers, if you don't like what we're doing, get out. And I don't want to accuse those in Utah of doing that, but I think that we kind of trust what's going on. We have great people running our schools and our education system, and so it's hard to think that we could be following a plan instead of leading. And I believe that every parent needs to question what's going on because it will affect their children. My 7th grader, we put in a Catalyst program up here in Wasatch County after parent pushback because they weren't offering an accelerated model with the Common Core state standards. And he has a class made up of entirely gifted students, and only about 3 of them are feeling challenged at all, and they're supposedly doing 3 years of math in 2. So I would be some sort of challenge involved with an accelerated program. And the students aren't. And I think that that is a very poor, poor quality of education. We need to make sure that our students are challenged, and but also not over challenged, and that we recognize that every child is different. One thing I'd like to point out is that across the nation, more and more education professionals are starting to speak up and oppose Common Core. It's a growing movement.
Yeah, Alisa, let me ask you, how deep is Common Core into Utah education as of today? Is it pretty deep already at schools around the state?
Well, it has to be fully implemented by 2014. So we are getting more and more into this, and it'll be harder and harder to get out the farther we go down the system, not because we can't, but because we'll have put money and time invested into it. And my children, I don't want them to be experimented on. This has been unproven and untested. And I think every parent in Utah needs to question this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if I'm a parent and I know nothing about Common Core, I've kind of heard the phrase Common Core, and I want to find out if my school is involved in it, if my children are already being involved in this. What do I do? What would you recommend?
Well, first of all, they can talk to their school and principals and teachers, find out what they're saying about it, and then if they want some information on the other side of the argument, go to Utahns Against Common Core, and that'll link you to several different websites, and you'll see articles there. And I know that thousands and thousands of hours have been put into research by citizens around the state, questioning what's going on, looking at legal documents, just trying to make sure that we are doing the best for our children here.
Is there anything?
So that is a good place to start.
All right. Is there anything a resident could do in the legislature? Would you recommend they call their legislator and say, hey, what are you doing about Common Core? Are you aware of the problem? Because I know I was talking with Oak Norton today, and he said you have distributed now a pamphlet to all the lawmakers up there to make sure they're aware of what's going on.
Yes. There's really no excuse. Across the state, leading up to the legislative session, I was getting reports, as well as some other friends that are helping with this effort, that across the state, at town hall meetings, this was one of the two hot topics brought up at the town hall meetings, this and gun control. And so that, I just think it's unbelievable that not one legislator is really actively doing anything about this when so many parents are upset about this whole system of education. And as more and more parents start seeing the results of what's happening, you're going to have more and more pushback.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alisa, it's an important cause, I think. And I think people need to be aware of it. They need to make their legislators know about it. And if they don't already, and let them know you're concerned. I mean, I don't see why we can't step back. And we have time now to take a look at this. And I think that's all you're asking for is people take a look at it, right?
Yes, and that's exactly right. And also, we need a cost analysis done by an outside entity, not by our school Department of Ed. And the reason being is we have agreed to a lot of reform areas in our No Child Left Behind waiver application, as well as when we applied for Raise to the Top. Now, the only thing we have reversed that I have found in our Raise to the Top application is the assessment system. And so we are moving forward with an entire agenda of school reform, and we need to make sure that we can pay for it. New York just put out a study saying that they're going to reject, they won Raise to the Top money. And the amount of money that they got with how much they've been asked to do, they said we need to reject this money because we just cannot afford this. Now, Utah didn't get any money. And yet we're still moving forward with these reforms with, not a lot of money to spare in our state. And so while education is extremely important, money isn't always the answer. We need to make sure that money is allocated to be effective.
All right. Well, Alisa, as always, keep up the effort. We'll try and help you out as much as we can. I think it's a very, very important issue. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. You have a good evening.
All right. That's Alisa Ellis. She was Utahns Against Common Core. They have a website, utahnsagainstcommoncore.com. Go to it. Learn more about this. Cheryl Eager just shot me a note and say the whole idea originated with UNESCO, the UN. All right. So you have Common Core, you have universal preschool. The administration is starting to push. Parents, be aware of this and find out more. More coming up right here on the Rod Arquette.
In a collapse.